Welcome back to another round of Ethereum Hot Takes, number 13. With us today, we have also, again, the legendary Ash Egan. Last hot take, we actually didn't do an introduction because we just had like a really good conversation flowing, and I just didn't want to disrupt the flow of things and got a little bit of flack for that. So we'll take the time this time to do a little bit of an introduction to who I am, who Ash is, and the topics that we're probably going to discuss today, although we haven't planned that too much. We're kind of just going to let it flow as we typically do. But just for posterity's sake, my name's Billy. Currently work at Consensus. Been in the space for about 8 years now. And love Ethereum and do Ethereum stuff. And I will pass it off to Ash.
Sweet. Thanks for having me back, Billy. I'm glad I didn't embarrass myself too much the first time around, but that's what Hot Takes is all about. Yeah, I've been investing in this space for the past 5 years. Started a small firm called Converge, went to Consensus, helped co-launch the venture arm there, and then 2 years ago joined Accomplice to lead crypto investing, spending time, in the Ethereum ecosystem with DeFi, sort of at the app layer, infrastructure, a few select other layer ones, down to talk about whatever we're going to talk about today.
Hell yeah. And yeah, so I think the main reason why I think we wanted to chat was, there's like a million things, but one thing we do want to touch on is centralized stablecoins, and the reason we wanted to explicitly touch on that topic is because of the whole USDC blacklisting scenario, which kind of blew my mind and scares the shit out of me. Hot take, that scares the shit out of me, but it's also kind of like a very good and timely example of why we need decentralization and why all of this stuff that we're doing is good. So yeah, Ash, do you want to give a brief intro to like what went down with all of that?
Well, you're like, when it came to people I knew would freak out, I was like, all right, Billy is gonna freak out. Well, so also, this was, I think it was earlier this week or last week? It was last week.
I think it was last week
that it was covered, but this actually happened months ago. And I think this is the first instance of USDC blacklisting an address. We've seen it in USDT, but it's the first time. But yeah.
Do you know how many times has USDT done it, and like what has been the extent of that black? I didn't even know that was happening.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sure it is.
You could figure out pretty easily on Dune Analytics or a bunch of other places.
USDT has blacklisted 39 Ethereum addresses worth 46 million in USDT. Holy shit. Okay, I didn't realize this was like so widespread. Okay, sorry for interrupting there. Continue.
But look, I think it's it's always been sort of like the trade-off of complete decentralization and usability. And it's the reality today is within DeFi and a lot of these applications built atop Ethereum, the most used stablecoin is DAI and USDC. USDT being used a ton on centralized exchanges, but I think that a lot of these users aren't even concerned at all about being blacklisted, right? If we see this go up, 10,000x, like if this is a continuous thing and it becomes quite arbitrary, massive concerns around USDC. But we're still so early in the lifeline of DeFi and crypto applications that, I think it's you don't want to. USDC is one of the most used assets in these things, and so I think it would be, you don't want to just like turn yourself off to it. I want to caveat that saying, if this is one of thousands of instances, or becomes arbitrary, then yeah, for sure. But I don't know, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and just for the people that aren't aware of what happened, basically there's like a blacklist function in these centralized stablecoins where they can just the owner of these stablecoins can blacklist addresses, and just basically any of those stablecoins owned by that address can no longer be like transferred out of that address, and so they're just like basically frozen forever. And so basically you lose all your money at the end of the day. Why this is like why that scares me so much is because it's a slippery slope. It's like, at what point, like like when do you stop blacklisting people, or like what's the threshold for blacklisting? Is it, you know, if you finance terrorism? Is it if you avoided your taxes? Is it if you're an enemy of the state? Is it if you're on the wrong political party? Is it if you're just like not friends with those guys? Like that's what scares me the most about all this stuff is like just and with centralized trust in general is basically you're just like you're trusting these people to abide by some arbitrary rules that I haven't even seen, or that maybe have been explicitly set that exist somewhere. But yeah,
I mean, we need standards. Like, we definitely need some type of standards. I think last year OFAC put out a list of crypto wallet addresses that were blacklisted, or that they, said these are malicious addresses. And if I think for companies like Coinbase to be explicit in saying like, look, these are going to be blacklisted addresses, or other wallets that have interacted with like the list of addresses that were blacklisted, or highlighted by OFAC. I get that. I think it's to your point around the slippery slope. Like, I think the first thing is like we need standards. And it was also covered last week, and it happened a while ago. So yeah, just interesting times.
I think you're right. Like, standards definitely required. Like, I haven't seen, and it's probably because I haven't looked, but I haven't seen any like rules around why someone would be blacklisted. I can make some assumptions as to why they would, but like I think it needs to be basically written in law. And there needs to be like contingency plans where, like, it's a little bit scary with crypto because it's like, okay, if you lock those assets and completely blacklist that address, then what if it's like done in error, or it's like a false positive? Then like that centralized party that issued that stablecoin should be responsible for like reissuing those assets to the person, so they're not just like lost forever. But yeah, I mean, this just, man, have you started reading the Infinite Machine?
I haven't yet. It's
Okay.
my weekend reading. Yeah.
Perfect.
During the week is work, but I'm pumped. I mean, but like, just to continue sort of on this theme of, blacklisting, like, let's say, like, I haven't looked at the wallet address and what their activity was prior to that, but like, if those funds went into, another exchange, or if they were flowing, through DeFi applications, like, you could in theory have a lot of well-intentioned people getting affected by, sort of like this one bad wallet address.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's why I think some of these laws are just really, really dumb. And like, under the current regulatory regime, you can't have like tainted or corrupted money flowing through all these protocols, because it just kind of like, it could be really bad. But I think like the entire regulatory landscape just needs to change. I think a lot of these, like, I'm actually a certified anti-money laundering specialist, so I like studied all of the AML and like CFT laws and stuff. But like, they're well intentioned and they like kind of make sense, but I don't think they're effective. And I think things could be done very differently. And I think they're probably, in some scenarios, like almost more detrimental than they are beneficial. So yes, in like the current landscape, I think something like this makes sense so that like the entire ecosystem doesn't get tainted with dirty money. But I think we can just like do better. But I think it'll be a while before we can do better. So maybe this is the best option we have right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you can also look at it from an opportunity standpoint, right? Like, DAI is still probably the most used stablecoin within DeFi, and USDC has been on the rise recently. It is a call to entrepreneurs. We need more approaches to, stable coins, but even like an extension of that, like usability, and like, so people have options. Do I want to use this stable coin that might be more decentralized, but maybe it won't be as stable or something like that. I think you want a whole suite of options here. And what we're all pushing for is permissionless innovation, and it would really suck to have sort of like these watchdogs come down on the most exciting sort of platform and category in the world, because of one bad actor or a few bad actors.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and you've kind of swayed me in the other direction. I was like,
It was that easy.
It was that easy. Yeah, I mean, like, uh,
it's so tricky.
My initial gut reaction was just like, wow, this is crazy, and it scares the shit out of me. And the reason I brought up the infinite machine is because like the first example given is like, people not being able to withdraw their money from banks. And it's like, that's typically one of the first examples I give to people when they ask me about like what blockchain is. I'm like, all right, well, think about if you worked your entire life and you're now 70 years old and you saved up all your money in the bank, and you live in a third world country where maybe the banks aren't as trustworthy as they are in the US. And then all of a sudden one day the bank just says, I'm sorry, your account balance is zero. Like, basically they've just taken your entire life from you. Like, think about like all the hours that you spent making that money. They just took those hours from you at the click of a button. And who are you as like some powerless individual in a third world country to fight this institution? Like, you stand no chance against them. And so that just the possibility of that happening really scares me. And so I think we desperately need something better. But I think you're right. Like, to preserve this realm of permissionless innovation and to kind of like reach a decent middle ground with regulators and to like kind of appease their needs to the best of our abilities, I think maybe this is the best we got right now, is centralized stablecoins being able to arbitrarily blacklist addresses. I don't know.
Well, let's see. Let's revisit this in a year from now or 2 years from now. I mean, like I think it was the same week, maybe earlier last week. Like, I used USDC to make my first like USDC denominated angel investment, and that was like prior to that, I was living in SF. I had TD Bank was my bank, and I'd have to go to the bank. There are no TD banks in San Francisco, so I'd have to wait till I made an East Coast trip, so Boston or New York, go to the bank, say, I want to wire this. There's some fee associated with it. I'm like going to check the docs, like telegramming or texting like the founder, like, is this the right bank account? Waiting a day or two, and obviously like super anxious the whole time, like, did you get it? Did you get it? Whereas with USDC, go on, buy USDC, send it to the wallet address of the team with, had X amount of block confirmations. That's it. Boom, we're done. And, I do think these things are totally get, sort of like places where you have more aggressive regimes. But, I think like what we have to focus on also is just making terrific experiences and improving on what we have today, and then making, all of global commerce more accessible, to people, to the folks who may not be as fortunate as we are.
100%. And that actually raises a good point. It's like, that's why I think your earlier statement was probably the right one, of like us needing standards, because it's like, how do we enable financial inclusion while playing by the rules of the current regulatory regime? And the answer is like, we can't really enable as much inclusion as we would like if we totally play by the rules. That's just a fact. And so I think like these centralized stablecoins with blacklist functions are like a decent middle ground, because it's like, okay, yes, anyone can own and transact these stablecoins unless they're doing something really bad. And basically what all of these AML CFT laws come down to, and like the way that every financial institution approaches them, is they just try to show regulators that they're doing their best. Like, none of them really care. If we're being honest, like, none of them really care if they're laundering money or if the money that's flowing through them are financing terrorism. I mean,
I think so. I mean, I think inherently everyone's a good person. That's just me being a super optimistic person. But like, yeah, I think if Brian Armstrong was like, all right, people are using Coinbase to fund terrorism, like, I don't know. I don't think they'd be okay with it.
Sure. Yeah, that was a harsh.
That's like the extreme example. We're
this
talking
is hot
like
takes,
complete
dude. Yeah.
extremes. Yeah,
This is
hot takes.
Yeah, this is hot takes. I'm just saying, like, typically what I saw as like a financial services technology consultant was they're just trying to hit the check boxes. They're like, oh, here's this regulation. Let's check the checkbox of this regulation. Oh, it says we need this control. Okay, we'll implement this control to make sure that like we're monitoring all transactions that are over $10,000. Or it's like they're just trying. Most of the people at these banks who are responsible for implementing these controls, they like, maybe the people at the top care, but like the people responsible for implementing the controls, aside from maybe like a select few, are literally just, they're just doing their job, and they're going to do the bare minimum required. And if it says to do like, and I think like this, going back to like decentralized stablecoins, I think this is just like yes, it is a good way to prevent bad actors from using the system, but it's also, in my mind, it's more of a way to show regulators, it's like, hey, at least we're trying. At least we have something in place to try to prevent this. And if we recognize something really bad, we have a fail safe and we can like shut them down. Whereas if that didn't exist, like, that would probably be a nightmare. So,
well, and it's also like, if you believe in the technology of like everything's audible, everything's transparent, whereas it blows my mind that a lot of these large banks are continuously getting fined for enabling just really, really bad illegal behavior. I mean, maybe we need to increase the cost for, these banks. I mean, it is just absolutely mind-boggling to me. And they're setting up 50 different companies, LLCs, and sort of passing it between these. Whereas, and it's, the audit trail is like almost impossible to find. Whereas, you look at blockchain and Ethereum, you just go on Etherscan and you're like, okay, this person made a transaction there. Like, it's just so easy to decipher. I don't know, that piece does blow my mind. And I also think that's another reason why, everyone is frustrated about banks, like your average person, even, larger companies, all these things. And that's why I think, decentralized finance, DeFi, is getting, has real legs, because it's like, the status quo is something I want the parallel. Like, what's the parallel system? Still a lot of stuff that needs to happen, but I think the sentiment against bank, I mean, it just blows my mind that there's still bad actors in some capacity.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, one message, like, to the one person that's listening probably, but like, I don't know. I think my statement would be like, hey, bad actors, like, I feel like it's like, yo, don't mess this up for us. Like, we're trying to take down everything that you hate. Just like, don't be a bad actor with this stuff because you're going to mess it up for all of the rest of us. But like, that's never going to fly. So I think, yeah, where do you think the onus lies? Do you like, I think with things like USDC, it's nice because it's like hit at the root of the problem. But like with something like DAI, where would the onus lie? Does it lie with the exchanges who are processing transactions, or like, what do you think?
It's a great question. I think ultimately it's protocols that are, I mean, it's not exchanges who are processing transactions. Like the exchanges are built atop these financial primitives, you know, things like Balancer, Compound, Uniswap, etc. And maybe they are the ones KYCing, you know, they're enabling the on ramps and off ramps. You know, they're the ones that maybe are offering up like app stores, or it's done via, you know, these decentralized apps, or both for some time period. You know, I think we'll see how the entire stack ends up playing out. But yeah, longer term, I don't necessarily know if they're going to be put in that position. And also the market has to decide, like, there's going to be alternatives for stablecoins. There already are within dApps. So if that, you know, if this particular event makes an individual sort of worried about using it, you don't have to. Like, you have, you know, today at least one other option in DAI, and you know, a ton of these other stable coins either launching or, you know, sort of smaller in market share.
I'm actually, yeah, I think DAI was actually really probably the worst example I could have given. But I guess let's say you got like you got some tainted ether. Where does the onus lie for like not interacting with that ether?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I've heard about tainted Bitcoin is that it will sell at a discount when it's being sold off. Longer term, unclear, you know, but I think it's sort of like a dollar bill. You know, like you've heard like every dollar bill is, you know, covered in a particular powder substance, or maybe it's $20, but I forget which it is. But I mean, there's definitely analogies there. Bitcoin is a lot, Ether is a lot younger, DAI is a lot younger than, you know, the US dollar, obviously. But who knows? Maybe it plays out that way.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, and I haven't thought about this very much at all. I'm just doing it now, but like, it would be nice if something like MetaMask maybe there's like, this is completely shooting from the hip here, but like maybe there's we build some sort of like decentralized system where people can vote on which addresses are tainted. That gets a little scary. But I mean,
I think it's the other way around. I think it's the other way around, where it's like these wallet addresses are high value add to the networks that they're involved in. And those wallet addresses, maybe it's based off of usage, based off of transactions, who else they interact with. But you know, like ideally, and it doesn't even have to be tied to, you know, your exact name. Like it can be tied to your pseudonym or whatever, but based off of historical behavior, you know, there is some type of reputation around it. And I don't know if it's like you start off with reputation. I don't know if that's the pure company to start, but there's definitely something there.
No, you're right. And yeah, I mean like one of the probably the first conversations we ever had was around like like I entered consensus wanted to do reputation stuff. So I like that we're going down this rabbit hole. But so yeah, maybe when you're interacting with MetaMask, so once we have some sort of like decentralized reputation systems, it like shows you it like pops up with like the reputation of the address that you're interacting with. And it can range from like it doesn't just have to be if it's bad, it could range from like it's like a credit score. It would be like, this is an excellent reputation. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, yo, this is completely blacklisted. This person's a terrorist. And it's like, you really don't want to do this. Or like MetaMask just like doesn't even allow you to send that transaction. It's like the confirm button is grayed out because like, this is a terrorist. You can't transact with them using MetaMask. But yeah, I like the idea of like a spectrum of reputation and
And you could even do something around like you pay far less in like gas fees or something
oh
like that,
yeah,
where it's like
wow.
another reputable address, especially in like a proof of stake world. You know, it's like these addresses are going to be prioritized, and then to send to a, you know, either less proven address or one that has a high risk or whatever, it's, you know, you got to pay $5 like current gas fees basically.
Yeah, or or like if you have a bad reputation, all of your transaction costs go up. So like you're incentivized to be a good actor in the system. Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
There's definitely something there. I think it becomes even more interesting in a proof of stake world. Um, you know, because then you have like, I'm sure you're tied to other wallets that could have slashing risk or something like that.
So I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but I want to touch on this a little bit. So um, a lot of the consensus mechanisms we design, like they're built to combat Sybil attacks. Like if we had proof of unique human, things would be a whole lot easier to design. Um, like the consensus mechanism would be a whole lot easier to design. But we don't have good proof of unique human. But like the systems that we're building using these consensus mechanisms and these like all of the stuff that we're doing, they're eventually going to lead us to a world where we have these reputations and we have like an idea of what a unique human is, or at least like a unique identity is. And so I think these systems are going to be kind of like recursively built. It's like we have this primitive system where we really had to like invent these crazy ways to combat Sybil attacks. These systems allow us to build these reputation systems, which allow us to build better systems that don't like that utilize that reputation in their consensus mechanism to like, you know what I'm saying? Like
It's all
it's like a
connected.
recursive it's like we're building the thing to make the thing that we built easier to build. And so maybe that's like Ethereum 3.0 is like using on-chain reputation in the consensus mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe. I mean, I think long term, all commerce is underpinned by smart contracts. Like, and your bank account is a smart contract. Every app you interact with that's tied to, you know, some other smart contract. You're contributing to these systems. You're getting paid. You can, you know, diversify. You can, you know, sort of like tokenize your time, and like there's, I think, and then sure, yeah, on top of all these things, you can have reputation. You're inherently going to have select people, products that you interact with more, and there should be not a lot of friction there. Like you should not have to, when I like, you know, search on Google or anything like that, you know, I don't have to pay a gas fee, or, you know, I don't have to deal with the, you know, sort of like clunky Web3-ness. And so, you know, for things that you're interacting with often in an honest way, that you're contributing a ton of value to, like you should be compensated for that. Like you shouldn't, and however, you know, however we can put metrics around that, Like, I think that's a fascinating problem.
Yeah. And I hadn't thought about this at all before, but like for our one listener, like if you're not aware, um, like gas costs are in place to combat malicious code and malicious actors and like infinite loops. And so if you can prove that like your code isn't malicious or going to like result in an infinite loop or like do something crazy that's going to really disrupt Ethereum or like take up too much bandwidth in Ethereum, like I think it shouldn't cost as much. Like, I mean, it's like, I think we have a pretty good system now. But like,
Recently, gas costs have gotten absolutely wild.
Yeah. And it's like, it's going to be quite a while before that goes down, I think, in my mind. Like we don't, unless all of these DeFi protocols start migrating to layer 2 solutions tomorrow, I think we're going to have high gas costs for quite a while, which ain't good.
Yeah, I mean, there's some super cool stuff happening. You know, optimistic rollups, especially. I think that's a fascinating area, and I do think, especially as some of these legitimate layer 1 contenders launch, like, you know, I think they're going to be explored by entrepreneurs that are thinking about building things that are higher in the stack, and they should be. Like, prior to this, how many options do you even have? Like, and we've seen what's happened to those other options. But I think now, like, you have some legitimate contenders for other layer 1s. And who knows how it's all going to look, you know, 5 years from now, if they end up building their own standalone ecosystems, if they're Ethereum sidechains, like what, you know, like who knows how it's all going to play out. But I think it's definitely needed and can serve it as an alternative while we wait for optimistic rollups. But also gas costs are high because there's usage. And so, you know, I don't think we should be too pissed off about high gas costs.
Yeah. And I do want to two comments. So one is I don't want to like box this into optimistic rollups. I think the conversation has largely trended in that direction recently, but all of the other layer 2 solutions are still viable. They're just like useful for, all of them are useful for different things. Like state channels are still relevant.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And so the conversation, although it recently has been all around rollups, like please continue to explore the other layer 2 solutions because there's a lot of really good work being done there. And then like the other thing is, my buddy just today, he bought Rune, which is on Binance chain. First thing I heard of being on Binance chain. And he's like, this was the biggest pain in the ass because I had to like get out my ledger and like buy Binance token or whatever, and then like interact with Binance chain. And he's like, this was the worst experience in my entire life. And like, I think there's going to be a trade-off between the usability of being natively on Ethereum and getting the benefits of operating on some other layer 1 solution. Like unless something else gains like significant market traction, I think the network effects of Ethereum are gonna.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Today it's I mean, it's been 5 years, you know, like the tooling, the developers, just having stable coins, like, you know, there's so much obviously happening within the Ethereum ecosystem. But yeah, let's see. I mean, who knows? Gas fee, like, does gas go up from here? You know, if it costs on average $10 to make any kind of transaction, usage is going to decrease. And where do they go? Where does it go?
Yeah. And I mean, then it's like, if traffic flows away, then the gas costs go down. So I think there's probably going to be some like weird equilibrium thing happening there.
Totally.
I want to go back to like the earlier point of like, if I don't mean to like get stuck on this, but like I thought it was such a good idea. It's like, if you're a good actor, you pay less in gas costs. Like, okay, maybe that's not like a good thing because you're like, maybe you're a good actor, but you're still consuming like a whole lot of bandwidth on Ethereum. But maybe you get like, maybe you get like a specific amount per month. I don't know. I literally have no idea, but it's like, I don't know. I think there's
like
something here.
A good analogy is, and it's not a direct analogy, but you know, a decade plus ago, it was all enterprise software, on-prem setup, you know, selling products via you go out to a meal, you go play golf or whatever, top-down sales, you know, you pay this big sort of implementation fee, and then maybe you have a subscription fee. Today, it's a minimal subscription fee, and it's a marketplace for discovery and all these things. And so, you know, subscription fees are great because now you have more predictability in terms of what you need to spend and all this kind of stuff. Like, it doesn't come down to like 1 month a year that you have to decide on, you know, your software, sort of like what your software suite looks like as an enterprise. You know, now you can just like, everything's a marketplace. You have Salesforce, you know, the App Store there. And it's actually allowed for more competition and all these things. Like, there is a world where participating in Ethereum is just, you're just paying a monthly or annual type fee, you know?
Yep.
And
that's actually, I don't know if I can like disclose this. I won't disclose too much. So we built
next
that.
time.
Yeah. We built something like that at ETH Denver. Basically meta transactions as a service, and basically implemented in like the enterprise. What that could look like is exactly what you said. Like, enterprises don't have to worry at all about interacting with Ethereum. They just pay this meta transactions as a service provider some monthly subscription, and that provider handles all the transactions for them. And if they start doing too much, maybe the subscription fee goes up or whatever. But like, I think that's going to be the model, because it's going to be really hard for these companies to interact with and hold Ether from like a regulatory compliance standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super cool. I mean, meta transactions are, you know, is the low hanging fruit. But, you know, let's see where gas fees are next week.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. Cool.
I feel like we've hit enough. Like,
I think we've done a lot. Yeah.
Juicy.
What else we got? Oh, I wanted to say one other thing is like, maybe the next decentralized stablecoin, like, I feel like there's going to have to be a natural evolution to DAI, and there's been some good proposals for things already. I think like Metacoin or whatever, but maybe the next evolution should include some sort of protocol for, I don't want to say protocol for, let's say, reputation, like built into the stablecoin, so that you can, maybe even if it's just in extreme scenarios, like do something similar to what these centralized stablecoins have done. What do you think about that?
I think reputation as a standalone offering isn't enough. It needs to be wrapped within either like a one app, many apps, but you almost need like a Trojan horse to, like, as individuals, we don't give a shit about reputation, like, you know, but if it is tied to, you know, a network of our friends or of our friends' friends, where you want to be perceived, you know, in a positive manner. Yeah, you know, I don't know if I'm paying for that, if I need to contribute more, like, sort of like how to define, you know, increasing my reputation. But no, I totally think that's just inherently going to happen. I think we are seeing reputation with, you know, some of these governance tokens, how you're voting. Like, I thought Compound doing that sort of like leaderboard was super interesting. It's really gamifying the participation process, delegation. Yeah, I think we're going to see an explosion of that with sort of all the activity that's happening within the governance token category.
Yeah, and maybe that's the topic for next time. Governance tokens. I think we can beat that one to death. So much to talk about there. Cool. Yeah, this is great. And also, this podcast was actually going to be originally called Proof of Drink, and we're going to like require participants to have a drink on the show. I might have had a little bit more of a hot take or a few hot takes than usual, just because we are now one White Claw deep. But yeah, I think we might rebrand. Like, in light of the previous podcast, which was literally barely about Ethereum at all, I think Proof of Drink might now be the way to go. That being said, sorry for rambling. Any closing remarks, Ash?
I mean, I think we need a third one. You know, we've done two.
I think so. Should we bring Andrew Keys in?
Yes. Yes, for sure.
I've been like hesitant to do it. I feel like I need to be like more proper before we're like well established before we brought him on. But
no. He's on the next one.
He's on the next one. All right, it's settled. All right, dude. Well, thanks for joining. This is awesome as always. Great to catch up. And yeah, sure, I'll talk to you soon. Make it happen.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, dude. Talk to you soon. Peace. Let me